a veteran of the airborne Europe, Navigator with the 451st Bomb Group, and he also served in Vietnam. So he's going to indicate some of the changes that took place in navigation. But I would just like to mention this. When we were in training in Charleston for our crew training, 3 B-24s were sent out over the Atlantic for a training mission. They were never heard from again. Now, we don't know whether there was a navigation error, whether they collided, but unfortunately, the next day, they sent all of the crews that were available out to look at the ocean. Not a trace was ever found of what happened to these 3 crews. So navigation, you know, in World War II was a very difficult proposition. And Alex, you can take over here and tell us about it.
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank Wynn for all his efforts, because to get the crowd together, without somebody like him, we wouldn't have been here. So thank you very much. Myself, like many of the crew members here, went through the normal routine. I graduated from high school in June of '42, which was prime time for people to go to war in 1941, 42, 43. I graduated in '42, June. In January of '43, I was in the Army. And I was up at Camp Claiborne in Louisiana, where there was 65,000 people as one camp, another 65,000 Camp Polk at Alexander Air Force Base, around this little town of 27,000 people. So it was just loaded with soldiers. They needed people in the Air Force looking for qualified people to join the cadet program. I said, gee, I'm qualified, so I thought I would try that. Initially, when I first got to Camp Claiborne, they had an epidemic of meningitis, and I caught it. First 8 weeks in the military, I spent 5 weeks in isolation. Fortunately, I recovered well. In World War I, 98% of the people that had meningitis died. So from that standpoint, I guess I was lucky. I took the test for the cadet program. I'm from the city of Chicago, the public school system there, which sometimes people wonder how it was. But I got a good education because I aced the program. I had no trouble at all getting the answers to the program. They had about 100 people, I guess, that coming in to take the test. It was one of these tests you can continue for hours if you wanted to. Well, they had time limit, an hour lead time limit. And I came out real well in it and was picked for the cadet program. After going through a pipeline, which was primarily holding to get people phased into the program properly, went through another Air Force basic training, went up to Decatur, Illinois, spent 3 months at a college there, then down to San Antonio, Texas, where I live now, to the classification center. And there they classified you to get all kinds of tests, see if you're qualified for either pilot, navigator, or bombardier. At that time, I qualified for all 3. But at that time, they needed navigators and bombardiers, so about 3/4 of the class went to navigation school, some to bombardier school, and a few pilots. And all the training was in Texas. And went through pre-flight to Houston, went down to Laredo for gunnery school, 6 weeks of gunnery school, and I really learned how to operate a shotgun. That was the big thing there. And it was great training for gunners.
Yes.
I learned how to lead and whatnot. And in fact, I had a sore arm when I left there. Went up to San Marcos for navigation training, and this was the middle of summer. These little twin-engine Cessnas that held 3 navigators, a pilot, and usually an instructor navigator sat in the instructor seat. And it was like being in a washing machine for 4 hours, and these trips were first was DR, where you just used your compass and drift to determine your course, and you had to get in at a certain time. Over 4 hours, they expect you to come within so many miles and so many minutes of your destination. And of course, you're on nervous and whatnot, and I actually got airsick for the first 3 times. As long as you could work, they let you get by with that. Then we started night navigation, using the stars for navigation, and then things quieted down and they did real, real well. Well, after navigation school, and finished in August of 44, then got assigned to Pueblo, Colorado for replacement training, B-24s, and they got him this. In fact, I've got some things that I thought that maybe I'd pass around. You can just pass this around to just pass these around. This is sort of a program in Williamsburg, Virginia, where I lived. They had an aeronautical society where we met once a month and had speakers, and from internal and also external speakers, and I was chosen to be one of the speakers, and that handout I handed here is basically what I talked about at the program. And it turned out also it was a pretty good presentation, because I made it to several groups, including 2 high schools where I live, to the ROTC programs there. So it gives you an idea of gives you a few pictures anyway. Well, we got the replacement training, and we got somewhere around, I guess, 50 hours in the aircraft. When we first got there, the co-pilot maybe had 10 hours in the airplane, the pilot had maybe 30 hours. And the big item I remember there, we got off one morning, got up 400 feet, and all 4 engines quit. There's a picture that there that shows that we bellied it in 4 miles off the strip at Pueblo, Colorado. Fortunately, everybody got out. We had really a good pilot, but it was somewhat inexperienced, and that was a big problem. Now, and I'll cover that again a little bit more. Well, after replacement training, we flew, we actually took the train to Newport News, and took the boat to Italy. And 2 weeks later, we ended up at Bari in Italy, which was the headquarters for the 50th Air Force, and then we're assigned finally to Foggia, Maine, or Foggia, where our airstrip was, and our crew was at that time. Well, this was November of 44, and the weather was bad, it was cold. I remember that, sunny Italy, it really wasn't that sunny. So flying was somewhat limited for December and January. I only got 2 missions in December and two in January. And on the first mission, they split people apart into different crews to get some experience. And so we went up to northern Italy, and it was just a routine mission. I had no problems there. But our nose gunner is Pete here, and our ball gunner, and the radio operator were on another crew. First mission, they got shot up and made Yugoslavia and had to bail out. So I said, gee, what's this going to happen here to us? Well, in any event, we continued with the bombing run, and I ended up eventually getting, when the war ended, 33 missions. They were short of navigators, so I'd fly with my own crew, and then the next day I'd fly with another crew. So when weather cleared in 45, March and April, and early May, we really got into intensive bombing. And I flew 5 missions in 5 days, and 7 missions in 9 days. Well, 7 missions was pretty close to that 35 total you needed. So I ended up with 33 missions when the war ended. I was going to cover some of the items. There's certain items that happen in life you never forget. And here's some of the things on the missions that I remember. On one mission, fairly early in the game, we were out over the Adriatic, lost 2 engines. Just maintenance, wasn't enemy action. And fortunately, we were close to the island of Viz. The people in the back end threw all their guns and everything out to lighten up the airplane, because with 2 engines out, a B-24 does not fly very well. Well, we finally did make the island of Viz and made a real rough landing. We did get down safe. And another mission, sometime later, we were on a mission up to Vienna, which incidentally, Vienna was one of our tough target areas. You could see Vienna from 50 miles away because of the burst of flak. It was just a cloud that you had to fly through. You know you had to go through that. So it was a tough mission. And on that mission, we were on the bomb run, and we lost an engine. Not due to enemy action again, due to just mechanical failure. But of course, when you lose an engine at 23,000 feet, you don't stay with the formation, and we left the formation. And I quickly just jettisoned the bombs to lighten the aircraft, and we got back okay with no trouble at all. With a feathered engine, made it all the way back. Thank God for the P-51s, because we had good escort. Without an escort, like single bombers were easily to pick off. So we had a good escort. On another mission, and this was probably the worst mission that I've been on. It was on another crew, not my own crew, and again up into the Vienna area, and we picked up 88 bursts under the aircraft on the right-hand side, killed a ball gunner, went right through, hit him in the head, and also got our right engine, at least a big oil leak, and I called the pilot, said, number 4 engine is leaking oil badly, watch out for it, watch that oil pressure. If we lost oil pressure and lost all the oil, the prop governors were controlled by the oil, and if you couldn't feather the engine, it would be as bad as having 2 engines out. Unfortunately, that did happen later. Unfortunately, we drew power for quite some time, and all of a sudden they ran out of oil, and the engine started running away, and they couldn't feather it. Fortunately, we had come close enough to northern Italy, and by that time we already had built an emergency airstrip, just a dirt strip, and we were able to get into it and land safely. Even one gear was shot up. One gear was about at an angle like this. We're supposed to be straight up and down. So we got through that very well, with the exception of the ball gunner. Some minor incidents and I'll touch on this a little bit later, but the big item is all this huge buildup that the military had to do, the Air Force had to do.
Can you speak into the mic, please? Thank you.
Okay,
Yeah.
can you hear better? Okay, if you can't hear, scream. Okay? Yeah, the huge buildup that the military had to do during World War II was just outstanding. We built 276,000 airplanes during World War II, and that was a tremendous undertaking. So, but some of the minor incidents that you learn from experience. One day we were on the target again to Vienna, and the bomb bay doors open, and the Navigator, we didn't fly a bombardier except in the lead and deputy lead. There's no sense in carrying somebody in the others because you're in the formation, and we just dropped the bombs on the first plane that dropped the bombs. And the Navigator had that problem. It was my job to go out after we climbed to altitude to crawl down the crawl space in the bomb bay and pull all the safety pins on the bombs. And also I had the pickle button. So I watched the lead aircraft, and when the lead aircraft dropped the bombs, I pickled on them, and we were able to drop them. So on this one incident, I opened up the bomb bay doors, and I got a report from the back that says, bomb bay doors not open. So they wouldn't open. Apparently ice or something got into it. The pilot says, well, I guess we'll have to take them back. And I says, no, we don't. Drop them through the doors. And that's what we did. And another minor incident, and whenever we dropped the bombs, I always called back, and the radar operator was real close by, and he could look into the bomb bay to see that they were all clear. And I said, bomb bay door clear? Bomb bay's clear? And he says, yes, they're clear. Well, I got finally, when we got back over the Edric on the way back, we dropped down over the Adriatic there, and we were well out of enemy territory, so it's an easy ride going back. And I always then checked the bomb bay, and if we didn't have a big 500-pound bomb stuck there. So anyway, it was my job to get rid of it. And actually, when you think about it, I crawled into that narrow bomb bay rack door, the room between the bomb bays, and you could click the bomb holding mechanism. It was just a two-thing mechanism and opened up and dropped the bomb. Well, I was up there, it was already clicked. So the bomb was just hanging there with the mechanism already triggered. And had we gone all the way back, just about the time we touched, that iron bomb would have dropped. And all I did was just kick it like that, and the bomb came out of the bomb bay into the Adriatic. So that's the type of things you learn. Another item, we're coming back again with another crew, and they starting to run short on fuel. And we had 4 fuel gauges, that little tube type fuel gauges you could watch as the fuel dropped down. It was way down low. And the engineer was just sitting there, wondering, I'm not sure we're going to make it. I'm not sure we're going to make it. So the pilot called in the air traffic control and says, what's the closest place we can land? And he gave us an abandoned field that was right on the coast. It was a dirt field. And we landed there, and at the far end, in fact, there was a flock of sheep. But we stopped before we hit the sheep. And of course, they flew an airplane in for us with fuel. And what he found there was, he says, you guys had 200 gallons in the wing tanks, why didn't you drain it all? Well, the engineer, the way they ordinarily did it, they had to turn on the switches for 10 minutes, watch their watch, at the end of 10 minutes, just turn it off. Because by doing that, the fuel from the Tokyo tanks, we called it, fed by the outboard engine, and if you ran it all out of fuel, all of a sudden the engine would run away because it didn't have any fuel. Well, of course, they controlled it with feather switches, so they could have brought it back, but that was undesirable, so they lived to that 10-minute rule. Well, in an emergency, when you're out of fuel, you run it longer than 10 minutes. But in any event, we got through that very well. And that's many of the lessons learned. The one item that I'm going to touch on a little bit later is experience. The one thing, building up to the huge amount we had to build up, 276,000 aircraft built. They trained 110,000 pilots, 50,000 navigators, about 40,000, I guess, bombardiers, and I don't know how many gunners and whatnot. It was just a huge undertaking, and safety took back seat. When we were in Pueblo, remember that mentioned that we got up to 400 feet and all 4 engines quit? Well, what happened is the co-pilot didn't have enough experience, and at 400 feet on the ground, there's cowl flaps on the engines that are opened up to cool the engine while you're on the ground. Just before takeoff, they put it in what they call trail, where the cowl flaps are slightly open, but not fully open. And then at 400 feet, when you pull the power back, then you close the cowl flaps, or you don't need them anymore. And there's four switches that you just pull back. Well, the co-pilot grabbed the wrong switches. Instead of grabbing the cowl flaps, he grabbed the switches, put all 4 engines to low RPM, which is 1,200 RPM. And again, here's where experience comes in. The pilot didn't have enough experience to catch it, because as soon as you found out, after a while, that if you don't have gas to the engines at altitude, they don't go down to 1,200 RPM. They go up to 2,800 RPM. So it's that experience that cost so many lives. And I've got some statistics I'll touch on a little bit later. Well, finally at the end of the war, of course, I had 33 missions in, and the war ended in early May, And we had our own airplanes. We wanted to bring it back to the States, so we flew our airplanes back. Came down through Marrakech in Africa, down to Dakar, to Natal, up to Dutch Guiana. I think we did one of the islands, Puerto Rico, and then up to Charleston. And then they took the airplanes, flew them out. Somebody else did. We went on leave. Somebody else took the airplanes out to Papersmont and the boneyard there. And one thing they did at that time, when they parked all of them there, they filled them all up with gas. I don't know why they did that. So eventually they sold them by the acre, and the people that bought them just sold the gas and paid for the airplanes. That's basically my B-24 experience. And anytime there's any questions, right, raise your arm. But it was a great experience. 5 minutes left, okay. Time goes quick. I got recalled in '51, and I went to college in the meantime. After World War II, I got out, took advantage of the GI Bill, got an engineering degree, and I worked for about a year or so, and I got recalled. And I ended up in Colorado Springs as part of survival school. They had C-47s. It was an amazing mission. If a bomber got shot down, we were to go in at 200 feet and go save the bombers. And we landed in a cornfield or something like that. And so I was with that for a while, in fact 4 years, and then finally ended up in research and development. And then in very few words, I ended up eventually at Cape Canaveral in Florida. There, I had the operations job on the Gemini program. So we launched astronauts. A very successful program. We launched 20 astronauts in 10 months on that program. It was a prelude to Apollo. In fact, every one of the Apollo shots had 1 or 2 members from the Gemini program, except one, and this one had one astronaut from the Mercury program. So that was a very good program. And then, of course, after that program, I ended up getting orders to go to Vietnam, where I was in an electronic warfare mission. EC-47s, these 25-year-old aircraft, were modified to hold 3 security service people and a navigator, pilot, and co-pilot, and we spent usually 6-hour missions, and I got 1,000 hours in that year's time looking for little transmitters. And then the navigator would call down, he'd fix where it was at very accurately. We were hoping to be able to fix it within a couple hundred yards. And then we would call the coordinates down via secure communications to the ground, and the intelligence people would do what they want to do with it. And it was a good mission. We were I got there in October of '68, which was about 8 months after Tet. And you know, during Tet, Tom Snood lost 400 people killed. But by the time I got there, it was pretty safe. In fact, we rode our bicycles into town. So it turned out to be a very, very exciting mission. I was senior navigator at that time, and I had 30 navigators under me, and we had 15 these EC-47s, which we averaged 150 hours a month per airplane. So it was a good mission, and I guess I'll probably stop there unless you want to hear something about Gemini. Okay.